So my pleasure to introduce the next speaker. Dr. Aniket Shah has spent his career at the intersection of business, academia, and international institutions. He is currently the head of sustainability and ESG research Americas at UBS. In this role, he advises major institutional investors on how to incorporate sustainability considerations in their capital allocation processes. Aniket serves on the International Board of Amnesty International and is a member of the World Wildlife Fund USA National Advisory Council. Aniket, thanks so much for joining us. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Gordon. Great to be with all of you, and thank you very much for having me. I would first just like to start by sending a note of appreciation to the co-chairs of SDSN USA, Professors Helen Bond, Gordon McCord, Jeff Sachs, Dan Esty, for your leadership and all the work that you have put into this initiative. And I would also like to thank Caroline Fox for her steadfast efforts in building and managing the network to date. So Gordon, as you mentioned, I currently lead UBS's efforts on sustainability research for the Americas. As many of you know, UBS is one of the world's largest financial institutions. And through this role, I have this unique vantage point to engage with both large pools of capital, meaning pension funds, insurance companies, banks, asset managers, et cetera, and with very large corporations, and serve as an advisor to both on how they can better integrate sustainability analysis into their decision-making processes. And so what I want to do today is just highlight three major observations that I think are most relevant to the work ahead for SDSN USA and perhaps many of you who are on today's call. So my first observation is that we are living through an absolute sea change when it comes to the awareness and consciousness of, frankly, all actors in the US economy on issues related to sustainability, the environment, sustainable development, or an industry term that we have developed called ESG investing. That's environmental, social, and governance-based investing. The zeitgeist has shifted, and this is causing banks, asset managers, regulators, and corporates to all get much more focused on where the sustainability agenda is and what their contributions to that can be. Let me share with you some numbers and some recent developments that proved this out. According to the US Sustainable Investment Forum, there is over $17 trillion of professionally managed US investments that take environmental, social, and governance factors into account. This is a 42% increase from just 2 years ago. So what does this mean practically? And practically, it means that financial markets are starting to price in sustainability risks and opportunities in a much more direct way than they have in the past. And this has had real impacts on the abilities of companies to achieve and access capital from capital markets, from banks, as well as to undertake certain transactions. And we can talk about that in more detail. From a regulatory side, the US Federal Reserve Bank recently joined the Network for Greening the Financial System, NGFS, which is a global network of financial regulators and central banks working through how to incorporate climate analysis into financial markets. This signals that arguably the most important central bank in the world, the Fed here in the United States, which oversees our monetary system and regulates large part of the financial sector, is getting very serious about the risks associated with climate change. This just happened a few weeks ago. And finally, from a corporate perspective, we have seen a lot of support, at least in language and in declarations for things like stakeholder capitalism, and for corporations to take a broader view of what their purpose in society is and who they are here to serve. Last year, you have seen, or in 2018, the Business Roundtable, which is the lobbying association of the largest corporations in the US, came together and declared that corporations need to respond to various stakeholders and not just to shareholders. You're seeing things like public benefit corporations increase in popularity. We had recently the first publicly listed company that became a public benefit corporation, and efforts like the B Corporation certification process are growing as well. So again, the first observation is that there's an absolute sea change. All different actors in the economy and the financial system are actively thinking through what sustainability means to them and what they can do. My second observation is that despite the growing awareness and consciousness around sustainability, there remain many fundamental challenges in how the private sector functions that prevents more productive and significant changes of how the financial sector and the business sector are involved with sustainable development. I would like to highlight just three of the major challenges as I see them. The first challenge is that we don't really have a clear goal or definition. The term sustainability is used more than ever before, but we have not really determined as a society, or more specifically as a financial community or a business community, what we actually mean by that term. And what we certainly haven't defined is what role business and finance should play in the achievement of sustainability and sustainable development versus what role the public sector should play versus what role civil society should play. So not only do we lack a clear definition of what we're all working towards, but we lack a clear understanding of the delineation of responsibilities. And that is a real problem, I would say, for this whole space and this whole movement. The second challenge is that the current policy and regulatory framework of the United States allows for corporations to legally undertake activities that may be at odds with efforts of sustainable development. Issues such as tax avoidance and the use of tax havens, minimum wage, corporate transparency around political disclosures. These are issues of the law and are issues of public policy and jurisprudence as well. So unless the policies and the laws change, you will not see a more significant shift in corporate behavior, unless, of course, the financial rewards of shifting behavior warrant them to do so. And in case that doesn't happen, then you're going to see a lot of the same. So again, the second challenge is that there are a set of rules in place that basically allow corporations and financial actors to behave in the way that they do. And there hasn't been much effort put on changing those in a significant way, in my opinion. And the third challenge is that there really does remain a disconnect between the time frame of the decision makers at corporations and at investment firms and the time frame of the needs of sustainable development. So stock markets operate on a second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour time frame. If you turn on CNBC, you will see that volatility right in front of your eyes, and something that really does impact investor behavior. Corporate decisions are made often on a quarterly or on an annual time horizon, at most on a 3 or 5 year time horizon. But the challenges of sustainable development and the investments that are needed in various capital stocks, human capital, social capital, infrastructure capital, business capital, and so on, many of these require decades to play themselves out. So this third challenge is there really is this disconnect between time horizons of the allocators of capital, the decision makers of that capital, and then the needs of sustainability. And those things have not, and that mismatch has really not been solved despite many good efforts in the industry. And finally, my third and final observation is that there really is an enormous opportunity for this network to help direct the growing efforts and interest in sustainable finance and sustainable business into practical and useful accomplishments. I believe that the three major challenges that I just brought up, that's number one, coming to a shared understanding of what we mean by sustainable finance and sustainable business, and then understanding the role of the private sector versus the public sector. Secondly, an understanding of the regulatory and legal constraints that prevent more significant shifts from happening. And third, this issue of the disconnect of time horizon. This is a good place to start. And frankly, I think all of those need a lot of focus. But let me just say that before we jump into action, we should think about how we focus, prioritize, and sequence our work. There are so many initiatives today that come out with a long laundry list of the shortcomings and what needs to change. But we don't really have a good sense, I would say, in this whole sustainable finance effort of what needs to happen first, what doors does that unlock to happen second, what the barriers are right now, and how do we collectively push through them. And so I think some strategy around that would be helpful in addition to having the right idea. So I'll stop there. I know we have a few minutes left. Happy to take any questions about how I see the business and financial worlds evolving on these topics. Thanks so much, Gordon.
Wonderful, Aniket. Thank you. So I'm not seeing any questions for you on the Q&A, so encourage people to put them on there. And in the meantime, I'll ask one for you. And then I see Dan has his hand up also. So mine is just, I'm guessing that a big part of what holds the private sector back is uncertainty about the future, both policy uncertainty, but uncertainty in the science. And, choose your favorite sector, whether it's energy or the food system. Where do you see science being most helpful? And here's your university network with lots of science capacity to reduce some of that uncertainty and unlock more certainty for investors in sustainable investing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Frankly, I think that there is less, the stumbling block isn't necessarily scientific uncertainty now on the climate and energy side. It is the policy uncertainty, which you rightly alluded to, which is to say, is the country going to continue to go back and forth when it comes to, a green push, or, we're in Paris, we're not in Paris, we're thinking about a carbon price, we're not thinking about a carbon price, or are we just saying we're going there? We are going in this direction, and over the next 30 years, you can make capital allocation decisions based on that direction. So I think to answer your question, first, I would say it's the policy uncertainty, not the scientific uncertainty. And where I think a university network could help is, frankly, investors don't have a good framework to think about public policy. It's a fairly naive way that the investors think about policy. I think the one place where it's a little more sophisticated is monetary policy. I think investors have learned how to study Fed minute notes, down to the comma, and make investment decisions based off of that. But we don't have a similar framework of how to think about what's happening in energy policy, federal versus state versus local, and the investment implications of that. So the political science community, I think, could be very helpful in guiding our thinking and helping us understand what is persistent despite the sort of turbulence and changes of administration and so on, versus what are things that actually could have significant shifts over a long period of time, and therefore you don't want to invest in that.
Excellent. Thank you, Aniket. Dan, your hand was up.
Yes. First of all, I want to say, Aniket, thank you for carrying forward this push for sustainable investing and better environmental, social, and governance reporting for now many years in several settings. So I think we've all benefited from that. And I'm a big believer, as I know you are, that particularly where governments are underperforming, having the investor community serving up pressure on companies to be attentive to their sustainability, particularly their climate change performance, is an important line of attack for moving our society towards a sustainable future broadly and toward deep decarbonization with regard to climate change. I want to pick up on your comment that you don't think there's so much uncertainty in the science. I think there's some uncertainty in the ESG metrics. And let me just press you for a moment on that if I can. I am concerned, and I hear it from a number of investors, and I think you and I, in fact, have talked about this, that a good number of the available metrics, almost all from private data collectors like MSCI and Bloomberg and Sustainalytics and Refinitiv, aren't carefully curated. There's not a consistent methodology behind them. Sometimes people report in their own ways, and therefore the ability to benchmark and to really identify leaders and separate out laggers and figure out best practices is reduced. So I wonder if you would just comment briefly on that and perhaps specifically say whether you think the answer to this might be a government framework for reporting. And I think the SEC could do, and let me just say to the network, among other hats I wear at Yale, I'm the co-director of the Yale Initiative on Sustainable Finance. We've just produced a book on the topics that Aniket has laid out called Values at Work. And for anyone who's in a university setting and has research underway on sustainable finance, sustainable investing, or sustainability reporting and metrics, I'd welcome a chance to connect with you and see if there might be some common lines of opportunity. But Aniket, if you can give us your thoughts on this, I'd be grateful.
Well, first of all, let me say, Dan, that we're all students of yours when it comes to this topic, and you really helped put this on the agenda amongst academics and the business world for decades. So thank you for your leadership. And I've learned so much from you through your writings over the years. On this question of sustainability metrics and ESG metrics, just taking a step back for those on the line who may not know, there is a big effort right now in the financial industry for companies to better disclose key sustainability metrics so that investors can make investment decisions based off of them. That, of course, leads to a very important question, which is, what are the most important metrics for companies to disclose, number one? And number two is, how should investors actually integrate them into their investment decision-making process? That's number two. And because there's no clear set guidelines of what companies need to disclose and how investors should think about this, what has happened is there's been a industry that has been created of, as Dan mentioned, of private corporations that serve to fill this void. So they try to get certain pieces of information from companies using surveys and conversations with businesses, and then they report that out in some type of scoring mechanism for investors to take that decision, to make investment decisions based off of it. I think, Dan, to answer your question, I think, frankly, the investor community is moving beyond the sort of ESG metrics conversation quite quickly. I think that what investors are realizing now is that although it would be nice to have a set of common metrics that get disclosed by companies, the chances of that happening are fairly low, and they're happening. It happens on such a slow timeline versus how quickly the investment opportunities are popping up in this space, that I think there's less energy around that, frankly, than a few years ago. I think it's still a problem that needs to be solved. I'm not very sure that we will come to a solution on it. I think there are too many disincentives at work for companies to come to a common framework around this. But I think we're getting better. And I think that things like SASB, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which of course you know very well, are providing at least some outlines around what the key issues are. But I think where investors are now really focusing on, to be honest, is they're looking around and they're saying, there've been, someone like Elon Musk and Tesla, right? You may think what you want about him as an individual and so on, but he has changed the conversation around electric vehicles. And had you known, or had you invested accordingly to think that this guy's going to change an entire industry, it would have been, at least over the last 5 years, a great investment. That type of thinking is the thinking, I would say, the zeitgeist of the ESG community, which is, where else are there major transformations at play? And how can I put my capital and align it to those transitions? So I think that shift has happened. And I know we're out of time, but I'm very happy in the future. If anyone wants to be in touch, just write to me. I think the organizers of the conference have my email address, so they can share that with all of you. But thanks for having me, and good luck with the rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Aniket. That was fantastic. There's one written question in the Q&A. If you have 1 minute to answer
Absolutely.
writing,
Yeah.
go for that. Otherwise, I'm going to hand the mic over to Dan for our next speaker. And thanks again, Aniket.
Yep. Take care.